Hey, it's Bill with the Late to Grid podcast. I am back in the Atomic Autosports studio to bring you another episode of inspiring information, and this time insightful information about data. Chris Ludwig with LMS EFI is back in studio to share his insights on how you can use data to become a better and faster driver. Also, he shares his ideas on preparation that lead to you not being late to grid. Let's throw the green flag on this episode. Chris, it's great to have you back on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Sure. I want to dive deeply into data. But before we do, there's a couple things I want to talk about. So the first is, can you share with the listeners why it's important to go to the bathroom before you get in the car for your stint?
I went to the bathroom. I did not see that coming. I guess I should have. So thanks for bringing that up. Don't overhydrate, I guess, and maybe be selective about the fluids that you do consume. Coffee's probably not, putting a bunch of caffeine in your body. That's a diuretic. Probably not the best thing you want to do before you get in a car for what's supposed to be a 2-hour stint. So, yeah.
Probably not. I forget. Was that Mid-Ohio or Pit Race?
It was Mid-Ohio.
Mid-Ohio. All right, folks. So here's what I'm talking about. So Chris was racing with us, the Radar Racing team. He had the first stint out. Of course, we have a great coffee sponsor, Heritage Coffee. So, of course, we all want to drink as much of that stuff as we can while we're at the track. And Chris radios in, I don't know.
We were
20 minutes?
25 minutes in, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I got to come in. And we pushed you out there at about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And you came in. But it's a good laugh. And it's something that as drivers, we always have to, you got so much, you're balancing your food, your hydration levels, your energy levels, your mental focus. At some point, something has to give. But we still had a great showing that day. And you did end up back in the car, I think, to bring home the checkered for us.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah. And, I've always thought it was funny. Endurance drivers talk about it a lot, peeing in the seat. And I've heard some say that they've tried and they can't. And I hurt so bad. And my kidneys just were killing me.
Oh.
And we got a caution. And, when you're under green and out rolling around, you're kind of concentrating on driving. It wasn't as bad. But as soon as caution comes out and you're just, motoring around under caution and it's front of mine and it hurt so bad. And I finally made up my mind. I am going to relieve myself because I hurt so badly. And I couldn't. So later that day, I called my buddy Wynn that I also drive for. And I said, well, I learned one good thing for you this weekend that, if that ever comes up, you don't ever have to worry about me doing that. So, it was, a lesson learned, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's great. I thought we'd just start off with a little chuckle.
Yeah.
So you and I were both at PRI this past year. Great show. And I asked you what the coolest thing you had seen was. And you said a pressure sensor that's embedded into a banjo bolt.
Yes.
Why would that get somebody excited?
It was just really cool and really small. It was like I didn't spend much time looking at all that stuff, but I just noticed it in passing. And so it was like maybe an 8mm thread bolt. So if you can imagine that, something that small, banjo bolt, and then having that sensor embedded into the bolt. And if you're wanting to do brake pressure, for instance, or any kind of fluid pressure that uses a banjo that has a banjo bolt integrated into the system, it'd be a simple matter of, instead of having to plumb in and fit a bunch of fittings together to plumb in a sensor, you just take your banjo bolt out and take this bolt that has the sensor embedded in it and, run it down, and you've got data now. It was just something I had never thought of, never would have thought of. And the things you see, the innovation that you see is just really remarkable.
Yeah, that's cool. On something like that, let's just use brake pressure, like you mentioned. Would you have sensors at all four corners or just measure one on the front, one on the rear?
Usually you'll have one front, one rear. Because, usually for the driver, really only need one. So one in the front or rear or whatever, because you're looking more for the driver. You're looking more at what they're doing with the brake pedal and how they're applying the brakes and releasing the brakes. So you can get that with just one sensor. For chassis development, you're probably going to want front and rear so that you can look at brake bias and know what's going on there. So
great. In motorsports and racing, we are always tweaking. We're always looking for improvements. We're always looking to take a step forward in growth. And last season, you mentioned to me that one of your big aha moments was sorting out the fuel consumption rate of one of the radial racing cars. How did that come about? How did you finally get that sorted? I can remember we were just dumping fuel into the car and pouring it back out in the garages at Mid-Ohio. But what led to that aha moment?
I don't know if it was aha. It was just trial and error and finally getting the testing time to validate what I was trying to do. So to back up, the ECU master system that we're using, that had been using in one car, and then we're working on fitting them to your other cars, has a what they call a virtual fuel tank algorithm that's built into their data system. And basically it works a lot like what an OE application does when you're in your car and it's driving down the road and it's telling you what your instant fuel mileage is and what average, and you have, it'll tell you have 20 miles left until Tilly or whatever. So it works a lot the same way, where it's looking at injector pulse width and what the ECU is commanding fuel consumption for the car, what it's putting into the engine. And so it's constantly updating that information. Now the rub to it is that you have to know the exact calibration of the injectors so that when the ECU says we're going to pulse the injector for 1.5 milliseconds, it knows exactly what that mass of fuel is that it's actually putting in. So that was the first part. Was there's kind of a fudge factor there, because you can have injector data that is maybe good or not so good. And when I set up that car, I didn't have real good information. You look up the information and it says, well, it's a 40-pound injector or 440 cc per minute or whatever. It gets you in the ballpark. And so then there's a fudge factor in the software to get you from that in the ballpark range to precise number that we need, that we want. And then the other part of that was that you guys have radium fuel cells that are a 14-gallon cell. Again, it's kind of like the injector. It says it's 14 gallons. Turns out we've got a surge tank. We got a couple pumps, foam, a lot of stuff in that tank. So when we were putting fuel in and pumping it back out, we were measuring exactly what the volume of that tank is. And turns out it's closer to 12 and a half once you put all that stuff inside of it. And once we figured that out, then we end up with pretty accurate information now that we can display on the dash, that we have, this many. And the other part of the EC Master system is that it knows the track you're at, the length of the lap, and it'll tell you have 2 laps of fuel left, 1 lap of fuel. It'll tell you if you want gallons or liters, how much you consumed, how much is left. And then at pit, what I was working on was a spreadsheet that I'd like to, it needs some work, but kind of the idea that we're getting, forget what the number was, like 12 and a half-ish miles per gallon under green flag conditions. And then we're getting, whatever it is under code 35. So let's take those numbers along with what fuel we have left in the tank and spit out a projected time number. So on an 8-hour race, ideally you want to go 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, and limit yourself to 3 pit stops. And with this time projection, can we make it? Or, if the time projection says we're not going to make it, then do we take advantage of code 35, maybe well short of what we would likely want to pit, and take advantage of that, knowing we're going to have to make another stop anyway. So lots of things going on. And I think we're finally at Mid-Ohio. I was really happy that we finally got zeroed in on that fudge factor. And now we're getting really accurate information. And then you guys go and want to build some new engines, then new injectors, and it's kind of we're going to have to start over again. But at least now we have a real good idea what the process is, and hopefully we can shortcut that and get in that ballpark a lot more quickly.
Yeah, just when we figure something out, we change.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that the Champ Car officials heard that we measured about 12.5 gallon capacity in that fuel cell.
Okay.
So any Champ Car officials, make sure you heard that.
Well, and that's something that got me thinking too, was how are they measuring, or, are they measuring that? Or if you showed up with a cell that had a part number on it that said it's a 17 gallon cell, but once you get all the stuff inside of it, it really has 15 gallons, which I think is their limit. Are they taking by the part number, or are they going to pump the cell and actually see exactly what it's holding? So that's something for everybody out there that, maybe wants to push that envelope.
I believe if there's a question, it gets filled and pumped.
Yeah, well, and that's the way it probably should be. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. You're involved in putting things together, designing systems that help engines run. You have a lot of clients that bring you projects, but a lot of times you don't get to see those projects after they leave your shop. In the relationship with Radar Racing, not only do you get to put everything together and engineer it and make it look beautiful and functional, but spending time with us Trackside, you're able to see your work perform and see how it helps us, maybe potential issues we might run across that aren't necessarily related to your work, but how we have everything configured. How has that helped you on the business side of what you do at LMS EFI?
I don't know. I think I've been doing it long enough. I'm pretty confident in what I do. It's good to see things in action. And I've talked about with you before that a lot of people probably don't know what they don't know, and they buy these things, and I can install them or sell them a product. And I enjoy when people use the things they buy to the extent of what it can do, and seeing that with you guys and being able to really delve into the deeper aspects of the products and make them function and give you the information that they can. I've really enjoyed that because I know a lot of what I sell, especially if I'm just selling retail and somebody's doing the install themselves, and that they're not using things to the extent of what the potential is. And so doing that with you guys has been just really a lot of fun and educational for me, because I'm really getting to push the envelope of what the products will do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you did so if the listeners don't know, you put together a beautiful build on my RX-7, wired all the sensors, all the datas, and you and I had a conversation at the beginning of that part of the project where I had an old Haltech Platinum ECU. Old, right? I mean, it's 15
at least.
Yeah.
Old. Yeah.
And the conversation I had with you is, what ECU do I need to buy for this? And you said you have what you need. All your engine needs is fuel and spark coming out of that thing. And I think that's important to bring up, because folks that want to do a build, whether that's a street build, a conversion, a race car, you have to talk to people like you about what it is, how it's going to be used, what the budget is. You could have easily said, hey, you need to buy this expensive ECU. And I would have said, okay. But the way that you understood what I wanted to do, that met it. So the reason I bring that up is how important is for somebody to do the research with somebody like you at LMS EFI as they're going down this path of selecting things?
I think it's really important. And where you get your information and how you process it, there's so much noise now. With, so many people go to Facebook, and there's great information out there, but there's also a lot of noise. And if you talk to someone, especially engine management, it's real important to talk to someone that knows your platform. So in your case, Mazda Rotary, I've done a ton of them over the years. I can tell you what you need and what you don't need. In your case, it was something you really don't need anything else. Now, if you had a turbo setup, you're running like a DCT transmission or even a sequential dog box, we'd probably want something newer. But in your case, we didn't. So pick up the phone and make a call. I'm to the point, we don't do a lot of telephone calls in general anymore, and I hate to get on the phone and talk to people. But call me and we'll get on the phone. And that's not to say I hate to talk to people. I just have grown. We've all gone down the path of, we send emails and we get on Facebook and we do Messenger and stuff like that. This is a phone conversation kind of discussion where you need to talk through, this is what my goals are. And, this is what I'm running. This is what I'm going to be doing. This is how I'm going to use it. And have those conversations, and, either on the phone or in person. Emails work, but, we don't have those conversations anymore. I remember years ago, that's the only way you could communicate. You called the shop and you talked about things, and we just don't do that anymore. And I'd really recommend picking up the phone, making those calls, and in a lot of ways, you need to learn the thing. Have someone that knows the things that you don't know and talk through that. So, that's my advice. And talk to several people. You can call me. I'll tell you something. Call somebody else. They might tell you something different. Maybe they're right.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know until you have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the focus and the meat of this episode, and that's data. And data has so many opportunities for someone in their motorsports journey, whether they're just starting out or whether they're growing through the ranks of WRL, SRO, going up in the IMSA. Data can provide so much information to help us be better. But let's baseline what data is. So when you're asked the question of data and what does it mean to me as a driver, as a racer, how would you answer that?
I think you mentioned kind of the progression, working up the ladder. I think it means a lot of different things as you progress as a driver. Starting out, it's probably just like lap time. There's a million different ways to approach it. And if you're starting out and you're really serious, you can delve in to deeper dives of data, but you first need to learn how to be consistent. And data doesn't do you a lot of good, in my opinion. If your lap times vary 2-3 seconds per lap, without traffic, if you're just out doing a lapping day and you're just running by yourself and traffic isn't involved, and your lap times are varying quite a bit, then there's more basic things you need to work on than really looking at data. So early on, it's probably just lap time, and a lap timer really can help you just generalize how consistent you are. And then once you start moving up, data is really important, but you also need to. It's a big learning curve to be able to translate that into something that you can use. And once you make that step, I'd say you guys, in working with you guys at Radar, you've got some really good drivers that are at that next step kind of level from, I would say, being intro level club racers to being potentially pretty good. And at that point, you need to be able to interpret the data. And that's where coaching can really be a benefit, and bringing either a data guy that can translate it for you, or hiring a coach for a weekend or two, and that can look at that and tell you what it means. The other avenue, I've always enjoyed learning and just doing things myself. Partly, I guess I'm kind of cheap, so I don't want to pay somebody to do something I think I can do, and maybe enjoy learning in the process. So I've always enjoyed making mistakes on my own to learn. And so there's a lot of books out there, and pick up books and read and read and read, and that'll help you if you want to do it yourself, to be able to coach yourself. But always, no matter what level you're at and what sport you're in, bringing that second set of eyes in to look at things objectively from outside can certainly help. So, yeah.
Well, since we're talking,
that answers your question.
It does. Yeah. So when you're driving and you're at the track, you're racing, and you have access to data, what are you looking at while you're at the track data wise?
Yeah. First thing I look at again is lap time. Am I consistent? And if a driver can be within a couple tenths, again, without traffic coming into play, lap after lap. And then you're at the point where you're doing the same thing at the same place in the track, lap after lap after lap. Now, whether that's right or wrong, you're being consistent, and then we can start working on making changes, and whether we need to move braking point up or back, or brake release up or back, turn in, different things, throttle application, how you're applying the throttle. Even if you're doing the wrong thing, you're doing it consistently, then we can start working on making changes. So the first thing I look at is consistency of lap time. And once you're there, then we're probably the first thing I'm looking at is min corner speed, and then brake application and releasing the brakes, and how you're doing that. So yeah, those are the real basic things that account for a huge part of how your lap time develops, and whether you can make progress or not. So, yeah.
So you mentioned looking at throttle application, and what was interesting is after our Champ Car race at Pitt, you did a deep dive into the data, and you saw during my stint that the throttle was being pushed 98% instead of 100. And so me being in the car, I could have sworn I had that thing down as far as it can go. And for the listeners, you might think I'm 6 foot tall, but I'm a short guy. Yeah. We made a seat change either the night before or the morning of that event, and we positioned it differently, which allowed us to see better. But perhaps the cause and effect of this is I didn't have the ability to fully put the pedal down.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
And it was less than that. There were spots where I think it was down in the 70s or something, because I made the comment to you that there were places where you were hitting 100%, and then there were places where it was down. I think like in the 70s, and then some like mid to high 80s. And because I made the comment to you that the mid to high 80s probably not really making a difference in power. You're probably still getting all the power, but there were some spots that were pretty low, and I'm pretty sure that's limiting the potential of the motor. And so yeah, and that's something you really want to know, because you're going to come back into the pits and say, yeah, it was flat. And so that's an area where kind of goes into more car development, the mechanicals of the car, where the data is showing you that, hey, we need to make a change to this car to be able to extract the full potential of it. So, yeah.
Or just have taller drivers.
Or have a taller driver. Stretch you, we hang you upside down.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. And I can remember that race, and there are times when I would reposition myself in the seat.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe push off of something or try to sink down a little bit. I know I have to do that in the RX-7. That's one of the off-season projects I have, is actually move the seat up slightly because it's a fixed mount.
Mm-hmm.
But I bring that up because that is just one small example of how data can help us. We wouldn't have known otherwise, me as a driver specifically, that's an opportunity to perhaps shave a couple of tenths off.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the times we talked before, and you mentioned it just a little bit ago, is looking at brake data. One of the first things that you look at when you start to peel away data and try to learn from it, when we're on track, we're always thinking about speed and application of the throttle as quickly as we can out of the corner. But why is braking so important?
It's easy, especially the cars we're driving, low power stuff, until you get up, probably 500, 600, 700 horsepower and really have big power that can light the tires up anywhere on the track. The throttle isn't nearly as important as what the brakes do, because the brakes, braking into and through a corner has a huge effect on how the chassis applies weight to the tires. And that's what you're doing as a driver, is balancing how you're applying the weight to the tires. And so one is that manipulating the balance of the car into and through a corner. The other is brakes will show you how you're approaching a corner. We see a lot of this with introductory drivers, new drivers. If you're new to a track, where you'll apply the brake, you come down a long straight, say, the back straight at Mid-Ohio, you come carry a lot of speed down there. You're like, okay, this is where I need to brake. You apply the brake, you see the brake pressure jump up, and then you realize, I got on the brakes a little early. The brake pressure falls. You kind of coast a little bit. You're probably not releasing the brake, and you might not even be aware that you're doing it, but you're coming off the brake pressure, coming off the pedal a little bit, because you started your braking way too early. And so you see it fall down, and then you see it come back up as you turn in. So that's one easy thing to look at. And in that case, you need to extend your braking a little deeper, so that pressure, what you want to see is the pressure come up and then trail off. And that's the other thing, where once you release the brake, you started your turn in. If you're new, you might have an instructor that's telling you to get all your braking done in the straight line, release the brake, and then turn in. That's not fast. So generally, what we talk about trail braking, you're going to brake, turn the car in, and as you turn the car in and turn it down to the apex, you're going to see that brake trace, tail off instead of falling off. And when you do that, you're keeping the weight on the nose and applying weight to the tire, to the front tire, to allow it to turn and, turn better. And there's balance to that. Maybe the car's really loose, and if you trail brake in very deeply, maybe it upsets the car, but there's balance to that. So the one thing generally you don't want to see is a trace going up and then just falling off, where you're releasing the brake before you even turn it. And so that's just general things you're looking at with brakes. And you might see as well, if you're trail braking in, and as you're turning in, you realize, I packed in a little too much speed coming into this corner, and then it jumps back up. Things like that you're looking for. In general, you want to see it jump up quick and trail off. But there's a lot of caveats to that as well. So that's just one thing you look for. What you don't want to see is it doing this.
Right. So you talked about folks getting started out with just sort of looking at lap timer data. At what point would they start to have a system that can show them either, brake application or throttle application, maybe even G loading?
If you think about it, I hate spending money twice on anything, and a good lap timer. You're going to spend a couple $100 probably on a good lap timer, unless you're using your phone or something like that. That works, when you're really first starting out. But you see this all the time, guys. They start out with their phone, then they want something a little better. Maybe what's the AIM Solo? They spend some money on that. Well, then I want a little more data. I want, and you've spent money over and over and over again. It's hard to dive in right from the beginning, but you can use that information really early as long as one, you've established consistency, like we've talked about, and you're a consistent driver. And then if you know how to interpret the data, or you're going to use a coach, if you're serious about going fast and being a good race driver, you can start right from the beginning if you have someone that, if you know how to interpret it, or you have someone coaching you. So there's really no time that I would say is too early, but the first thing you need to do is establish that consistency, that I can go out and run laps and not make wild, inconsistencies over a lap.
Right. Yeah. And so is there a number you have in mind? Let's just say it's a 2-minute track, or the person's out running 2 minutes on that track. Is 10-second variable, is that too much, or is 2 seconds?
Yeah, that's way too much. Once you get inside of a second, then you're getting somewhere.
Okay.
Ideally, you're going to want to be several tenths, lap to lap. Once you're within at a club level, and once you're within a half second, then you're, in my opinion, you're starting to really do the same thing, establish a rhythm. And that's something you can really work with. If you're 2-3 seconds, anything over a second, then that's something to still work on. And that doesn't mean the data can't help you work on it. But, if you're wildly different in your line, or wildly different in your braking point where you first get on the brakes, or brake release, or whatever, data can show you. And it's kind of like you in the throttle, when you come back to the pit, in your mind, your leg was fully extended anyway, whether or not that was the extent of the travel of the pedal. In your mind, that's all you got. But then you can come back into the pit and say, okay, this, I actually my braking point is actually varying by 50 feet lap to lap. Then that's something that can be pointed out. Maybe you didn't know that,
Mm-hmm.
So it can be useful at any time. It's just, can you interpret it? Is somebody interpreting it for you? And what's your motivation to improve? At what level do you say, I'm good enough, I'm out here driving and having fun, and I only do this a couple times a year. You can't work up to that level of consistency if you're only doing a couple track days a year. And if that's what you do, and that's what is fun for you, then great.
So there's 2 times I think when we can look at data. One is trackside, we're at the event, and the other is post-event. You're back at home. We all live busy lives. We have busy times at the track. You're pulling off. You got things to check on the car. You, of course, always have people coming up asking questions. What are some quick tips to review data while at the track? Whether it's do it between every session, focus in on these elements. What would you recommend to listeners to check in between sessions to help them learn?
Yeah, again, lap time consistency. Then you can look at things like, you can pull up histograms and look at like a throttle histogram. What percentage of full throttle are you at a lap or over the course of your session? So things like that. If you have, it's always good to have someone to have data to compare. So looking at the pit weekend, and this was something that I did afterward, but you can do this if you dedicate time. That's one thing about data. You need to dedicate the time to it. So if I really wish I had looked at that at the track when I was with you guys, because what I saw was consistently, I was running. I ended up looking at your data and Dylan's, and looking at kind of the three of us. And consistently, I was a little quicker than you guys, but you guys were consistently quicker in a couple spots, and you guys were doing something a little different than I was in several turns, actually. And then there were a couple turns where I was doing things that were different than you guys. And one turn in particular, I was, putting quite a bit of time on you guys through this one turn. And if we'd looked at it at the track, then we could have made those adjustments at the track. So, but it's just the idea that you're dedicating the time to it. And if you got a half an hour that you can just overlay speed traces. In that case, that's what I was doing, was looked at a speed trace, and the one particular corner, I was carrying a lot more speed than you guys were. And then there were other corners where you guys were rolling more speed. I want to say you guys were braking a little earlier, gave up a little more on entry, were very similar at a min speed in the corner, but because you gave up a little more on entry, you were able to exit the corner more quickly and carry more speed down a straight. And that, allowed you to put some time on me through that section. So there were areas where we could have learned from each other. If you're working by yourself and don't have data to compare to, then it's a little, I don't want to say harder, but that's when you back up and you look at brake application and throttle application, steering angle, things like that. And just generally, are you doing anything that's upsetting the car? Do you feel the car's loose in this corner, the car pushes in this corner, I can't put the power down, I put the power down and it's taken all of it. It feels like I should have got on the gas earlier, things like that. And you need then, as a driver, to come off the track with those mental notes of it's doing this in this corner, it's doing that in that corner. And the thing you don't want to do is overload yourself. And you need to pick 1, 2, maybe 3 corners where you're having trouble. I feel it. The car's not right. The car's not doing what I want it to do. And then go back and look, and are you making the car do that? Or is it something where, no, you're driving the car properly. We can make a change then to the car and make it do more of what I want it to do.
And then sort of that same question for home. And if any listeners like me, you hope you unpack the truck and trailer when you get home, unpack the car. You go back to normal life, and then you always think, man, I got to go back and look at that data. So what are some best practices for doing a deeper dive into all the data you collected at the track?
That's the same thing. One, it's a commitment. It's a time commitment, and so you're either going to have, if you have a coach, you're going to have that person look at it and take care of it. If you're going to do it yourself, you've already made the commitment to learning. You're reading the books. Your AIM has just a ton of really good videos on their YouTube channel. And they're universal. They're made for the AIM software, but the ideas are universal. So go watch, if you're a YouTube kind of guy, go watch those videos and learn, so you got to learn what you're looking for. And then, you got to make the commitment, and set time aside. And that's hard for everyone, but if you're serious about it and you want to, learn what you're doing and learn how to get better, then make a commitment. And it doesn't have to be hours and hours. Set aside an hour. I would say within the week after the event, so that things are fresh in your mind, and just sit down and look. And again, it's for me, I'm looking for consistencies, and then consistently, am I doing the things that I went into the event? That's another thing. I'm excited to go back to pit with you guys to apply what I learned from last year. So you went into the event with a plan, and this is what I want to do. And then post-event, did I apply those things? Was I doing what I wanted to do? Did it make a difference? Did I go quicker? Did I not? Did the things that I thought I wanted to do, did it really make a difference? Or, it didn't. So then we got to start looking at a different plan. But make a commitment. It's like any sport, if I want to be a good golfer, I got to go play golf. I can't sit at home and, you can sit at home and read books and things like that and educate yourself, but then you got to go out and you got to apply it. And it's the same way with racing. I want to get better. I go to the track, I do my work there, but then am I coming home and educate myself and really critiquing myself and coaching myself? It turns out, that's what it comes back to is coaching. Either you have someone that's telling you, I see this, let's try this, or are you going to coach yourself? And you need to take time to do that. So, yeah. Make that commitment.
Well, I just have 3 more questions. One has to do, the first one, with your big goal for this year, and you want to be the father and husband that your family deserves. And in the demanding lifestyles of folks that are involved in motorsports, you're a business owner, and you're at the track, you're traveling. How do you balance that? How do you balance home and track?
Let me know. I need a coach.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. It's hard. And as I was saying, you need to make that commitment. In my mind, I'm thinking about the times where that I commit to going over data and doing the things I need to do on the computer. I'm not doing, I'm not reading to my kids at bedtime, or I'm not, spending time with my wife or whatnot. I'm very fortunate in the fact that I have really supportive family, especially my wife. She's amazing. But, in this case, talking about motorsports, and the one reason I don't have a sim rig is because I know I would be on that thing hours and hours and hours and hours. And that's a commitment I make to my family, that I don't even buy it. So in my case, it's communication, just communicating with my wife that I need to do this. And then also balancing, knowing what the limit is and knowing that I can't spend, I would be on my computer every night, either looking at data or looking at engine maps and things like that, and data logs from dyno sessions and all that kind of stuff, because I enjoy it. It's a business, but it's a hobby as well. So communicate. And if you really want an answer to this, you need to have my wife on for a session, and because she's a mental health counselor, and she would tell you all the things that you need to talk about and how to work that out. But yeah, I don't know, schedule and communicate.
Yeah, I think the big one you mentioned there is communication. It's, whether it's in business, relationships, whatever, communication is important. And when it doesn't happen, that's when the problems arise. So that's great. That's great advice. How do people get a hold of you, Chris? If they want to learn more about how to get your services, maybe they want to bounce some ideas off you, email they need some help with data, what's the best way to reach Chris Ludwig at LMS EFI?
You were real close there. Email's best. Chris, CHRIS at LMS-EFI.com. And call. I know I said earlier I hate to talk on the phone, but I love to talk about this sort of thing. And I'm a one-man band, so very seldom do I actually answer the phone the first time because I'm knee-deep in a project. So leave a message, but that's 502-515-7482. And email or call. And I'd love to talk about whatever project you got and try to help you out.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put links to that and that information in the show notes. Last question. What advice do you have for the listener to make sure that they are not late to grid?
Do the work in the shop. Don't come to the track and know that you have, this part that needs to be changed. You got to do the brakes at the track or something like that. I know we're all busy. It goes back to that scheduling and time thing. I'm a firm believer in races are won or lost in the shop. And you guys, Rate Air guys, for anyone that's been around and watch you guys work at the track, you guys are very well prepared. The cars are done when they show up at the track, but then you're also ready when things, in endurance racing, there's always something that comes up. Mm-hmm. You guys are well prepared with spares and know where they're at, how they're packaged, and what you need. And so you guys have done the work at the shop. And there's no substitute for preparation, and that starts before you even get to the track.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on again. You're a repeat guest, and you shared some great ideas today. So thanks again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.